Hello everyone. So let's do something that's pretty fun. If you watched the previous video, we installed React Native for Mac, iOS. Probably want to go back and watch that if you haven't. And in this video, we're going to install or create native modules in iOS. So this is pretty fun to do. It's where you are actually having your React Native application talk to native iOS platform code. So built into React Native are a bunch of wrappers around native code. They've ported many things into JavaScript so that you can directly code your app in JavaScript and not have to use the native platform or the language, which is Objective-C. But sometimes there are certain types of functionality that are not available. I personally don't know off the top of my head what some of those would be, but it doesn't matter. We can make anything we want in order to just test it out. So it's a little tricky. There's some quirks. Obviously, you go to the Facebook documentation and you read it and you try to figure out what they're telling you to do. It's a little bit inconsistent. Some things are left out. It's not perfect. You're going to run into issues, and it's going to prevent you from actually doing this. So I'll run through all the issues that I've run into and how I fix them. So first off, we need to go, as always, we need to find out where our installation of our app is. So continuing on from the previous video, I just made this first React Native app. And inside of that is a iOS folder. This is where the actual iOS build files are, the Xcode project, and everything to build the native code or the native application for iOS. So if you're on a Mac, well, you have to be, because that's the only way you can work with this platform. You have to have Xcode installed. So if you have Xcode open, you can always do Command spacebar Xcode, and that will bring it up. I already have mine open, but if you don't, you just do File, Open, and you move to the directory that is your project, but you don't open the project, the actual native React project folder. You open the iOS folder that's one level below it. Okay, I already have that open. So it'll have a project folder for your app, a library folder, some tests, and a products folder. And we don't need to worry about that. All we need to do is say, I want to build some native code, or a native module, as they call it, to talk to that my JavaScript can consume. So let's see. The first thing that I ran into was, well, let me go through how you do this according to the instructions. And by the way, here's a good article on doing this. It's pretty thorough. And then here's another one that's really quick. Like, it just shows a really quick way to do it. Very simple module. If you just want to get something quick out to test it, to see about doing this. And here's a good article that is a real in-depth explanation of what's going on with this whole process of building modules in React Native. Okay, so in Xcode, we're back in Xcode. The first thing you want to do to build a module is you have to add the source code. So what you do is, I just put it in this first, this folder that is at the top. That will be the name of your project. And I just do File, New, File. And you have to build a Cocoa class. So this is an Objective-C file. And if you're familiar with C, it's along the same lines. I'm not going to really get into explaining it, so that's something you'll want to learn on your own. I'll go next, and the class is going to be this thing, this module that I want to create. I'm just going to create this thing called a string provider. That's just going to pass strings back and forth. So it won't do anything complicated. It won't use anything on the native platform besides returning a string type back to JavaScript. Okay, clicking next. I'm going to put it in the first folder, and then it's going to ask you, so it's going to create two files, an H file and an M file. An H file is the header file, so that's where you put the signature of the interface that you're creating. And so there's no actual code goes into the H file. So the first thing we need to look at is, what do we need to import in order to build a module? And what we need is a bridge module. So whatever it is that you happen to by default have in this import right here, change it to rct bridge module.h, and then the interface is going to inherit from the a NS object RCT bridge module. So I created these files previously just to have something to copy and paste. That's why these are here. So, but we're starting from our string provider. So this is a module or a piece of code that was created by React Native, by the people at Facebook. And if you want to see where that is, it's actually in the source code of the project you made under the node modules folder, and it's under the React Native folder, and then it's under the React Common, and then right here. So wait, that's not where it is. It's in the libraries. And well, it's here. Oh, there it is. React base, and then this RTC bridge module. So that's where the source code for this is that React built for you. And so if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, this is just like we're inheriting from this. And this code is Objective-C, so it's pretty complicated to understand. It's very different from other programming language syntax. So just take this for granted. And so now that we have this interface defined, we're going to actually put the code for it, and that's going to be in your string provider .m. .m is where the code goes. So let me copy the code that I already had from the other implementation. And what we are going to have is what the important part is the, well, let's see, this is another thing where we're starting to use Objective-C terminology or syntax or features. And if you don't understand that, then you kind of might get lost. These are macros, so they are where code is going to be injected by the compiler. So if we go to, let's see, jump to definition, we'll see this macro. And all it's going to do is take this code and replace it and put it right into this, right where this is. And then this is kind of like setup code. The React Native runtime needs this in order to know that this thing you're making is a module. So what it does is when you start the app up, it looks for everything that has this, and then it registers it somewhere and says, okay, this is a native module, store it somewhere to use whenever they actually want to use it. Not going to get too deep into that. Maybe another video we can go delve deeper into that, but here is where we are defining a method that you can actually call from JavaScript. So just this defines a method, just take it for granted. The method name is this get thing right here. So I could have just said, I'll change this to get some string. And this type, the sender block callback, is a function that is a callback function. So it's kind of sticking to the JavaScript approach of things in that we use callback functions to transmit information back and forth. So this is how you define a variable, a string variable in Objective-C. And then this is how you call a function in Objective-C. And so that is extremely simple. It's saying in JavaScript, there will be a method somewhere, which we'll see in a bit, called getSomeString, and it will take a callback, and this will call the callback sending in just this word. Let me change that. So that's it. We could put a lot more stuff in here. Anything that you can code in native Objective-C and iOS, which I'm not an expert in, so I wouldn't even know what that is, but anything you could code natively can go into here. So the next issue that I ran into was the RCT bridge module, where I showed you where it was over here in your project under React Native, React Base. That's not actually part of your Xcode project. I'm not sure. I downloaded the latest version of React. Everything's up to date as of the recording of this video, but it didn't include the path in the build. So Xcode didn't have any idea what this was. So there was an error. So what I had to do is, if you click on the top root of your project, it brings up these settings or the settings interface. And if you go to the top navigation bar and you click on build settings, so there's capabilities, resources, info, build settings, and then you scroll about halfway down, it's in alphabetical order, these sections, these areas, go to search paths. It's going to say use header search paths. And there's one section for debug, one section for release. And if you hover over it, there's this plus sign, which brings up a box to type into. And, well, that just deleted mine, so let me copy it out so that I can show you how to put it back in. Actually, let me take it out so I can show that error, which I saw right the first time I tried to build. So you can see that when I tried to build, I took, let me get back to the file explorer, took those out of the paths, and now I have the error for the Xcode has no idea where RCT bridge module is. So we need to put that back in there. Okay, so let's go back to where that was, and search paths, use search paths debug. Let's add back in there. So first we add this $src root, which is a keyword in the path which says start at the root. But the root is actually not what we want. The root is the iOS folder, but we don't want that. We want the node modules folder, or we want the root up to the React Native folder. So that's why we have to do the double periods to get back up one level. And then we go to the nodes, modules, React Native, React, Base, and that's where that module was that we're looking for. So let's put that also in the release. Okay. So if we now build or push the play button, the code should build. Okay, it built. So now it's starting up the package manager and the simulator, which we don't need right now, so I'm going to stop it. Okay, so now we have actually built a native module, and it's right here, our string provider, and it has a method called getSomeString, which just returns this literal string. Very simple. Okay, so that's now in our code base. So how do we get to use it from JavaScript? Okay, so now we're going to get out of the Xcode world, and we're going to go back to the normal React Native JavaScript world. So I'm going to use a different editor, whatever you want to use as just a simple text editor. I use Visual Studio Code. So now I'm going to go to not the iOS specific folder, but the React Native folder, the main root folder for the whole app. And open that up. Okay, so I have the React Native project open, or the directory open, and I'm going to go to our index.ios.js, which is at the root level, because we're working with iOS right now. And this is like the normal default code that they give you, starter code. So now we need to think, how do I use the module I just made? And it is actually really simple. You're going to have to require in native modules. This is built into the React Native system, so they put this into the JavaScript runtime, which is JS Core, which is Apple's JavaScript virtual machine runtime, or JavaScript engine, whatever you want to call it. So they are controlling it. So they said, well, we're going to make this thing called native modules, and when you require it, it's going to bring in all the native modules that are registered in the system. And then say, well, what module do you want? Well, we made our string provider. So this name right here ties up to the name you gave it right here, string provider. So this is the class name in more traditional sense, string provider. So that's what's going to be right here after the dot. And that's just built in. It's magically just going to be there. Great. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we put it in a variable, of course. I'll call it string provider. And then we're going to use it. So I'm just going to put it in the interface, the user UI, with, I'm just going to print it out. And we do that by putting the information into the state. So after I include string provider, I'm going to use it. It is this class that we built, and it had this method called getSomeString. So we can just call that getSomeString. What does the, so this is just a function, normal JavaScript function. We're calling it. Well, what do we give it? Well, we give it a callback. Here's an arrow function, which is just a normal function, and it's a callback, which gives you this variable, this parameter, some string. Or it could be, this could be whatever you want. You can call this whatever you need. And then the callback is doing a set state. So this is a React thing. I'm not going to explain React in this video. So hopefully you already know about that. Otherwise, watch the other videos. And when we call set state, it's setting an object with a message and the value of this myString that's coming from your native code. So you're calling, let's go through the flow. You got this object that you imported from the native modules. You're calling this function. As soon as you call it, it goes back in the native code and it calls this thing. So then it executes this, and then it calls the callback, sending in this variable. Boom, goes back to JavaScript, calls this callback, and we're going to set state with message to myString. When we set state, of course, the view is going to re-render. Let me do this. Where should we put this? Let's put this in the constructor. Maybe a better place would be, let's see if that works. So I'm going to do that in the constructor, and then as soon as we call set state, the view is going to re-render, and I'm just going to print it out directly. So hopefully it will just show up on the page. Let's see, that should be it. So we imported the native module. We're calling the function that's directly on it with a callback function, and in the callback function, we're setting state. Okay, so we save this, and it should be good. So we go back to Xcode, or you can run React Native space iOS run, but since I'm in Xcode, I will just push this play button to make it easy. And it's going to bring up the simulator, and it's going to bundle up the JavaScript, start the JavaScript runtime. It's going to load all the native modules into memory, and it's going to enter the entry point, the iOS entry point, and start running the code. Okay, that took about a minute to come up. And we can see right here, something that I want to get from native side printed out. So it worked. So you have a lot of flexibility in building these apps. Whoops, so that was extremely simple example, but it's the way you do it, and you have unlimited possibilities of with what you could do with this. So I hope that helps, and happy coding.